Hello, everyone. My name is Talal, and welcome to Popcorn and Soda, the show where we discuss all things movies, pop culture, and so much more. As always, I want to thank each and every one of you for making me a small part of your day. All right, another year has passed. Great movies, movies that weren't as great, and everything in between. And as we look forward to the year of 2024 and all the movies that are to come out, it is that time of the year where we look back at the movies that were the most disappointing movies for me this last year. Now, the list of most disappointing movies for me is going to be based largely on films that I felt had amazing potential, but just crashed. Whether it was somewhere in the plot point, somewhere with the pacing, the acting, where it just did not overall complete the movie going experience for me and left me very disappointed walking out of the theater or watching it at home. And again, the beauty of cinema is something that I like, you may not. And something that you like, I may not. And that is perfectly okay. As long as we're fair with our criticism and our feedback, that is all. So, how's this going to work? I'm going to list my top 5 most disappointing films of the year, descending from the least to the most. And please follow along. And I'm curious to see if any of my movies are on your list as well. All right. Number 5 on my list of most disappointing movies of 2023 is M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin. I love M. Night Shyamalan, and I love horror movies. You guys know me from my videos here. Horror is my favorite genre. And even thrillers. I can kind of throw thrillers in there as well. And a good horror movie makes you feel like nothing else. And a good thriller makes you feel like nothing else. And that is why I was so excited for Knock at the Cabin, because M. Night's been on this amazing run of films recently. And it stars one of my favorite actors, Dave Bautista, who I absolutely love. And I think he's such a great, versatile actor. Knock at the Cabin had such amazing potential. The trailers look great. The first half, the movie was great. It's about this doomsday cult of people that find a married couple and their child in the cabin in the woods. And the whole point of the movie is that these people believe that this couple needs to make a sacrifice for one of them to kill one of themselves to save the greater good. And it's, of course, an M. Night Shyamalan movie, so you know you're going to have an out there story. You know you're going to have a twist in the movie, and you know you're going to have great characters. And that's what I love about M. Night. No matter what anyone says about his movies, I have a great time with them. Knock at the Cabin left me so disappointed because by the end of the movie, it became a predictable film, and I thought it had such great potential to be a great film. But the second half of the movie, it just did not work for me at all. Just did not work. And I thought the characters of the film, they became, their, it's hard to explain. It's like their motives and the way they are at the beginning of the movie completely changed. And that's okay. That's fine. But I just didn't think it was justified. And I just didn't think that the movie had that grand finale that it was almost setting up to be. And I just left the theater being so disappointed because I wanted something more. And I get those from M. Night Shyamalan movies, but Knock at the Cabin just did not give me that. So, good first half, I will say that, absolutely. And don't let this deter you from watching it if this is something you're interested in. But for me personally, I was very left disappointed with M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin. All right. Number 5, Knock at the Cabin. Number 4, another horror movie. This one really broke my heart. Exorcist The Believer. Again, ditto to everything I just said about horror movies. My favorite genre, and I love the Exorcist franchise. I think it's a great franchise, and with it now being under Blumhouse, Jason Blum, one of my favorite producers, I think the guy can do this anything he wants. He's so talented with the filmmakers he brings on to do these films, the stories that they create. love Blumhouse. Exorcist The Believer was such a disappointing for me. It's like such a disappointing film for me because I watched the film and it didn't even feel like anything really to do with The Exorcist. It feels like they bought the rights to the Exorcist franchise, they slapped on the name on there, and that's pretty much it. The scares were not that good. The only saving grace for me for this film was Leslie Odom Jr. What a great actor and what a great powerhouse of performance that he put on, where he carried this film. And the reason why this is on my list of disappointing movies is because they could have completely reinvented the Exorcist franchise, the Exorcist story, and brought it into like, a really modern take. But what they really did was they went back into the nostalgia of the franchise and they brought back characters from the original Exorcist. And I'm all for that. I really am. But I think there's a missed opportunity because honestly, if you ask an average moviegoer today, like a millennial or a Gen X, moviegoer, most of them probably haven't even seen The Exorcist or know what The Exorcist is. It's a very old movie compared to today's standards, and they relied on the nostalgia factor rather than innovating on the Exorcist brand and the Exorcist story. And I just think that it relied too much on that, where the movie didn't have a chance to stand on its own 2 feet. Again, great. It was a decent story about, two missing girls, and then we find out that there was some demonic possession potentially going on with those two girls, and they're missing, and then they get found days later. And that's where the story starts to unravel about what happened to these girls. And again, I think the issue that I had with this film was that it just relied too much on nostalgia, and it didn't reinvent a franchise that it should have. And who's to say, because I know they're working on a sequel. I know a lot of people had similar issues with the movie that I did, but hey, I'll give Blumhouse all the credit in the world because they do listen to their audience. And who knows, the sequel may be something brand new and a fresh coat of paint on this franchise that I think is much needed. Instead of going back, let's go forward, guys, and let's create a new generation of Exorcist fans. So that is why number 4 on my list is The Exorcist. Number 3 on my list of the most disappointing movies is a movie that I was so excited for, but it let me down so hard. That's The Flash. I'm a big Andy Muschietti fan. Again, back to the horror roots. I just did not vibe with this movie at all. And I don't know if that's the whole, like, Ezra Miller stuff that happened, for the last couple of years, the delays of the movie, all the reshoots that happened. This, like the CG, the weird CGI in the movie. This movie had the potential of being such a great movie, but it was just part of this collateral damage that at this point that the DCEU has become, that it had no chance to succeed. It was one of the most least grossing comic movies of the year, if not, I believe it's one of the least grossing DCEU films of all time. And it's sad because they put their best foot forward. And who knows, if this movie was done right, it could have potentially led to Ezra Miller coming back as the Flash, which probably wouldn't have happened because of everything that happened. But in general, I think it would have gotten so much great buzz going into the brand new DCU that James Gunn and Peter Safran are creating if this movie was done right. And I know a lot of people love The Flash, and you know what? That's awesome. I'm glad that each and every one of you that enjoyed it had a great time with it, because there are some great redeeming elements about this movie, but the return of Michael Keaton as Batman was probably the highlight of this film. And it just felt like it was a wasted opportunity and effort with that character. And just the CG and like all like the crazy cameos in it. Yeah, I it didn't work for me at all. And I thought it was just one of those movies where you can see that there was multiple hands in the movie. It wasn't just Andy Muschietti's vision. And I could be wrong, maybe it was, but to me it didn't feel like that. And the reason why The Flash is on my list is because there was so much potential for this film. And it doesn't even scratch the surface of what it could have been. Because it was literally depicting the biggest DC storyline, Crisis on Multiple Infinite Earths. And it kind of blew that. And I guess In hindsight, that's really been the story of the DCEU, where it never lived up to its potential, and The Flash sadly is another installment in that. Number two on my most disappointing films of the year is a film that I watched at this year's Toronto International Film Festival, and that was Poolman. Their directorial debut, one of my favorite actors, Mr. Chris Pine, who I don't think gets his flowers enough. So, Mr. Pine, here's a virtual rose for you. You deserve it. But this movie was one of the worst experiences I've had in a movie theater in a long, long time. It was a struggle to get through it. It really was, because it did not know what it wanted to be. And when it did know what it wanted to be, it was like a spoof of like 3, 4 different movies. And it was just the dialogue, the story, the characters. I could not connect with this film at all. And I watched this at one of the press screenings at TIFF, and it's unfortunate, but like a lot of those Twitter or X tweets that came out were correct. I would say a solid quarter of the movie walked out in the first 30 minutes. And this movie, and then as the movie progressed more and more, and it sucks because I'm a big fan of Chris Pine. I think he is such a marvelous, talented actor. And who knows, maybe Chris will learn from this film, and I'm sure he'll do another movie down the line. And like all great creatives, we all learn from our past projects and we do what we can to improve. But this movie to me had no heart. And that's what really disappointed me about it, because I wanted this to be great for the amazing cast. Annette Bening, Danny DeVito, Chris Pine. It's a stacked cast, but the story of the film is just so like something out of the 80s or like early 90s that it just didn't feel like a contemporary film at all. So, not much more that I can really say about Poolman. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Number 2 on my list of most disappointing films of the year, Poolman. All right, now before we get to number 1, I want each and every one of you to go down there in the comments below and do comment what were some of your biggest disappointing films of the year. I'm really fascinated to hear what you guys thought. And specifically, if any of my films are on your list, I'm curious. I'd love to hear your guys' views on my list and even your list. All right, now before we get to number 1, let's run down the list one more time quickly. Number 5, Knock at the Cabin. Number 4, Exorcist Believer. Number 3, The Flash. Number 2, Poolman. And my number 1 most disappointing film of the year, Mission Impossible Death Reckoning Part 1. Where do I begin with this movie? The reason why I put this as number 1 on my list is because Mission Impossible Rogue Nation and Mission Impossible Fallout were 2 of my favorite movies of the year that they came out. Tom Cruise is movie theater king. He creates spectacles for the big screen. For example, Top Gun Maverick. He is a box office genius. He is a movie theater genius. He creates films for the big screen. This movie was so disappointing that I couldn't even believe that this is the story that they landed on. Amazing cast, do not get me wrong. Haley Atwell, Tom Cruise, Becca Ferguson, Ving Rhames, everyone. Simon Pegg, the entire crew is back. But this movie, I was just shocked watching it, as I'm like, what is going on? I didn't feel any stakes for the characters. I didn't feel anything, on the line. And I didn't even like the action pieces in this film. And I get it, it's considered part 1 of 2. But I think they're really going back to redo this film, because it wasn't just me. It looks like, a lot of the moviegoers, they did not come out to watch this film. Regardless of what I felt about this movie, big shout out to Tom Cruise and the entire McQuarrie team, because this is one of the first big, massive movies I was shot during the pandemic. And they did their best to keep Hollywood going, making sure people have jobs, people have work. So the moral aspect of this movie, behind the scenes, big shout out to Tom Cruise. But the movie itself suffered. And I think they need to really revisit what the shot for part two and come up with a new movie or something altogether, because the first movie did not work. It was so disappointing because you have two of the best action movies of the franchise prior to this. But this movie just fell so flat. Like, I watched it with my brother, who's one of the biggest Mission Impossible fans that I know. And even halfway through the movie, we kind of were like side eyeing each other. And as we walked out of the movie, we're both like, that was flat. Even my parents, like, they don't really watch too many Hollywood movies, but I took them to the theater to watch this as well, and they love Mission Impossible movies. Outside of the big train sequence, even they weren't a big fan of this movie. And again, I'm not saying it's for the lack of trying, but when you create two-parters, you have to make sure that the first part is, it's going to lead us into the second, where we want more. We want to know how the story resolves. And I think the first part of this movie, it was just, it did not work for me at all. And it's disappointing because I love this franchise, and I hope part two, or whatever they end up doing with the second sequel that they've already shot, is a great movie, because I think the cinema and the movies need Tom Cruise and the Mission Impossible series. But this movie was just, it broke me because I was so excited for it. Half the movie, and one more thing, my one final rant about the Mission Impossible series: 99% of the things that happen in this movie were in the trailers or in the featurettes that they released before the movie came out. You know, the big motorcycle scene off the cliff. I don't get it. And again, even in the opening credits of the movie, they show pretty much the entire movie. I'm not a fan of that at all. I think that is just terrible. I said it. I think that's not a good form of storytelling, because you're showing us everything that's going to happen. So it becomes predictable. You start piecing, okay, now this is where this is going to happen. This is where that's going to happen. And I just think the whole marketing of this movie was just, I think it let the movie down before people even came to watch it. So I have to say, this was an easy choice for me. Unanimously, my most disappointing movie of the year was Mission Impossible: That Reckoning Part 1. So there you have it, guys. Those are my 5 most disappointing films of the year. Not necessarily the worst movies of the year, but they were movies that I think had so much potential to be so much more than what they ended up becoming. And they didn't. They actually just kept going down, 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 and just by the time the movie ended, I actually just wanted to be finished with the movie. So, but hey, as I always say, art is in the eye of the beholder. Back to my little line: something I like, you may not. Something you like, I may not. That is perfectly okay. That is the beauty of cinema, my friends. So once again, please do remember to comment below and share your list of the most disappointing films of 2023. And as always, please remember to like, share, subscribe, click that little bell icon to be notified of my new videos. And as always, I want to thank each and every one of you for making me a small part of your day. And that was my list of the most disappointing films of 2023.